Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Kyle Barnhart. I'm with the GVSU Alumni Relations Office. I'm joined today by Melissa Perino with GVSU's Center for Adult and Continuing Studies, along with Dr. Adrian Wallace, who will be taking us through the presentation today. This monthly webinar series is a partnership between Alumni Relations and the Center for Adult and Continuing Studies and features a range of topics for your personal and professional life. Now I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to introduce Dr. Wallace and get us started.
Thanks so much, Kyle. This is really exciting for us today. We love all of the faculty and staff that have joined us at this session, but today we are pleased to welcome Dr. Adrian Wallace, who is a faculty member in the Advertising and Public Relations Department at Grand Valley State University. She obviously says, oh no, the PhD, I just earned it, but you don't need to call me that, right, by any means. So, right, we'll be thrilled to be hearing from Adrian today. Adrian is certainly an enthusiastic communicator who has over 20 years of experience in industry in both the public and private sectors that ranges in scope from nonprofit, health, education, government, hospitality, politics, lobbying, and finance. Adrian, I'm not sure there isn't really many industries that you haven't yet touched. If not yet, you will soon, certainly. Adrian is an assistant professor who specializes in social media and integrated campaigns. She also is a fellow with the Lillian Lodge Copenhagen Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication and a former fellow of the Michigan Political Leadership Program. One of my favorite parts that I learned about Adrian is her passion for student to professional development. And as such, she advises a variety of student-run organizations, the student PR firm Grand PR, the Public Relations Student Society of America chapter at GVSU, and the National Millennial and Gen Z Community Chapter at GVSU. Perhaps some of you that are with us today have had interactions, maybe a class or worked in a student organization with Adrian. And if you want to throw some love out in the chat, feel free to do that. We'll go over.
Good vibes only, good vibes only.
Right, yeah, only love, only support, and all of those good things. A high five, if you can find that too. But one of the other things that Adrian does is serving as the ad and PR internship director. So she helps students get practical and real world experience. She's the Bateman Competition Faculty Advisor, the Digital Marketing Competition Advisor, and also the Center for Advancement of Digital Marketing and Analytics Social Media Competition Advisor. So if you want to compete, whether it's in your student life, right, or your professional life, Adrian is the person to talk to. Obviously, as you will see very soon, she has a hard time sitting still and also maintains a professional practice with Black Truck Media and Marketing in Grand Rapids, which is also owned by a GVSU alum. I think one of the reasons she's so engaging and that you'll be able to hear about today is thinking about, she presents and publishes mostly on the digital divide, social media and public relations pedagogy, student-run firms and data-driven strategy in social media and politics, which really puts her right at the intersection of public relations, marketing, advertising, or integrated communications. So while you don't need to be a marketing professional to really find relevance in Adrian's work and presentation, I think what you'll find today is a connection to what this series is about. It's about connecting your personal and professional worlds and finding something new that you might be able to apply to both. So speaking of the personal worlds, we haven't yet asked about, and we definitely will later. Adrian is also on her personal side of things. She's married to the digital director at Lambert & Co., a two-time GVSU School of Communications alum, Derek DeVries. They live on the West Side, call themselves West Siders, proudly I am certain. And they are parents to rescue beagles who may make a guest appearance today.
You never know.
You never know. That is the best part of it. To Watson and Rosie. So we're thrilled to welcome Adrian, Watson and Rosie, and all of you here today. Just a few housekeeping things as well before we get really rolling. We are recording today's session, and so you will, as a participant, get a copy of this in your email inbox. We also encourage you, if you haven't already put some love in the chat box, but we encourage you to focus primarily on that Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen, unless you've been fancy enough to move it somewhere else, right? But use that Q&A. We got a lot of great questions that we'll work at the end of the session in advance. But by all means, if you hear something that triggers a little like, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? By all means, throw a question in the Q&A box and we will work that in at the end. Again, it is honestly my pleasure to introduce you to, or to turn the microphone over to Adrian Wallace. So thank you, Adrian, for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. This is a really special honor. I have spent a lot of time and money at Grand Valley as a student, and now as a faculty member, being able to sort of, I don't know, make sure that Grand Valley magic gets passed on. So I just wanted to give an early shout out to the first good vibes in the chat to Megan Benali. I'm so happy to see you here. Thank you for also being a mentor to my students. So I really appreciate how that circle just kind of keeps moving on and on. So welcome. This is the Emerging Trends in the Future of Social Media chat. I'm sure you're going to get much more than you bargained for here. I was laughing a little bit when talking with Kyle to organize this, because asking for like a 30-minute sesh on this is the equivalent of, you know, basically cramming an entire semester into just a few moments. So if at the end of this you feel like you have lingering questions or anything that you want to throw out to me through email or LinkedIn or whatever, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I am pretty findable, and I'll leave my contact information at the end here. So what will we be doing today? Well, we're going to look at our current social landscape, because it's impossible to kind of talk about the future when we really don't know how things are changing right underneath our feet. We'll talk about some emerging areas of importance. Of course, we're going to leave out a whole bunch of areas of importance, but I tried to focus this as much as I could on the spirit of what I was asked to talk about, which was, you know, small business or medium-sized businesses and personal use of social media. I'm hoping that everybody gets a little bit of something they can take back with them. And then the last thing that I do want to cover today is like, what should you do? Like, now that you have all of the facts, all of the knowledge, all of the things, like, what do you do with that information? And that's probably going to be the most valuable, where the most valuable takeaways are. So what in the world is happening? I would be remiss if I didn't address how COVID has really changed how we as people do things, right? So COVID-19 increased internet traffic by over 30%. We are at an all-time high of using connected technology. You might even find yourself at night like thinking about all the time you weren't connected during the day, which is probably not a lot of time. More than half of the world now uses social media. And all of these habits that we're forming now, we're not just going to break those when we like go back to whatever the new normal looks like, right? We're actually going to keep these habits with us and move forward. So keeping that in mind, it's really important to understand how people then use social media around the world. So a lot of these slides that look like this, that have this sort of dynamic in the July in the top left, come from a study from Hootsuite, We Are Social, and the Global Web Index, which puts out several studies throughout the course of the year, but that luckily have improved, I guess, the data since COVID. So this is really important, because a lot of these types of studies just haven't been released yet, or in the process of being released, in terms of how we use social media or how we're using our time during COVID, but more importantly, how this is changing us, which is going to be a theme as I keep going back to that here. But social media users have grown by more than 10% over the last year, taking our global total to 3.96 billion in July, which of course is higher now, I'm sure. And so that means that there are more people now on than off for the first time. And so in thinking about how that indicates what we're going to do moving forward and what trends that we're going to see, we have to think about within the past 12 months, people that are using social media or adopting social media for the first time equates to almost 12 new users every second. I mean, just think about that for a second. It's a tremendous data point. The pace of our growth has really boomed, of course, within the last 6 months. And that's probably related to COVID, although there have been a lot of things that have happened in the last 6 to 8 months, if you think about it, that could be indicators of how this has grown or how this has changed. Our mobile use is way up. Almost everybody uses digital media, social media on their smartphone. So some behaviors to note within the perspective of how people engage with social media is that 99% of people visited a social network in the last month, 88% actively participated. Now that is a pretty astonishing number actually, because that means that they didn't just view it, that they did something, they reacted or they engaged in some way, whether that be posting their own social media content or responding to somebody else's. The average amount of time per day spent on social media, I actually think this is a lie. I think that this statistic is a little bit higher, and we're going to see this in the next quarter reports be higher than this. But it's 2 hours and 22 minutes per day on average. Most people say they're using that time, of course, for work purposes and social media, but we all know what happens when you open up that tab or open up that app on your smartphone, what happens next. You know, 6 hours of like internet videos about cats on YouTube and like what happened to the day, right? So when you're thinking about why this matters, I mean, people are on a whole bunch of different platforms and they're looking at a bunch of different types of social media, and I'll outline what those 5 types are momentarily here. But looking at what that means long term, I mean, there's a lot of potential for you to be seen, see, or notice any type of activity or use this medium for business or pleasure. So your typical social media user is using about 9 different platforms regularly, which is quite a few, honestly, if you think about the landscape. So Facebook continues to dominate everything per the usual. Their core platform is 2.6 billion monthly active users. 2 more billion people use WhatsApp, which is the messenger application that they acquired in recent times within the last year, I think. And Instagram also continues to grow. That in itself, like now that you can purchase through Instagram, I think is really the biggest indicator of growth there, because their advertising audience data is so much greater now. It's 1.08 billion people that use the platform each month for a variety of different needs. And I know what you're about to say, but I hate Facebook. I mean, of course, everybody hates it, but you're not doing anything about it. It turns out you actually don't hate it. You rely on it. It's a habit. We get it. There's nothing to be ashamed about here. It's fine. You're among friends. Facebook continues to dominate as the most popular platform. It owns also WhatsApp, Instagram, IGTV, and Messenger, which are probably also freestanding apps that you probably use. But at its core, just the Facebook app is 2.6 billion monthly active users. And then, you know, everything else is kind of just icing on the cake, honestly. I know that like something I wanted to make sure that I address here is like the instant fame of like TikTok and how every TikTok video is like, has this like, you know, virality to it. And yet still Instagram is far ahead of TikTok with monthly active users. TikTok has 800 million compared to Instagram advertising that reports 1.08 billion people use Instagram regularly. I just wanted to say thank you for anybody that put a question in their registration, because that did help me kind of move this presentation through a really complicated sort of timeline. But I wanted to make sure that I addressed all the questions that were asked of me. And so the first one here is from somebody that said, I'm starting a company, but I'm ethically against Facebook. Same, sis, same. How can I advertise my company without supporting systems I don't want to be a part of? I guess the good news first. 97% of people learn about local businesses online more than anywhere else, print or otherwise. If you're still okay with digital, because I wasn't really sure based on this question, but if you're still okay with digital, I would say check out Google My Business, which used to be called Google Local. You can publish offers, events, videos, photos, manage your reviews, claim your space, give people tours. There is a place for freestanding content there that rotates, I think, every 7 days or so. The next thing I would suggest that you do is utilize organic content on any platform. Photo and video first, obviously, depending on what kind of business that you're in. I mean, if you're like in like tax forms, probably not photo or video, but pretty much anything else is probably going to fall within the purview of having good content for video or photos. I know I'm about to say Instagram, which I know you know is technically part of Facebook now if you've been paying attention here, but Instagram still is one of the #1 spaces, particularly for purchasing and involving people in a high engagement level. Outside of that, you can engage nano influencers, which we don't even really get to the influencer culture in in this presentation, but that would take a whole nother, set of hours that we don't have here today. But if you're thinking about using any type of influencer for your business, you can look at nano influencers, especially if you're local, which are those that have under 1,000 following. And I know that seems counterintuitive, like, would you like Kim Kardashian to be your influencer or Martha, your next door neighbor? But I would ask you, who has more power in this situation locally? And that's Martha, because she takes a good corn casserole to the church dinner, and she's nice to your kids and has the best Halloween candy, and people trust her. So thinking about how you engage with those influencers locally is super important, because they do have a lot of clout locally. Build reviews. I touched on this already. People research everything. It is one of the trends that we're going to talk about momentarily here. But people are using social media more and more to do research, not just the, Google or Bing. I know Bing, people are still using it. But people are using social media like search engines. And so understanding that that's still important from those areas too, to build reviews on a Facebook page, or to build on Yelp, for example, another social app. But then also referral-based loyalty programs are super important for scaling a new business, particularly if you want to kind of look outside of digital. And I know this is not going to be popular, and I'm going to say it anyway, because you expect this kind of thing from me. But if MLive calls you, don't answer. If you want to talk to MLive, you call me first. I'll refer you to somebody that's not just trying to take your money, that's a really great ethical person. I've heard horror story upon horror story about trust in this area, and that's all the further I'm going to go here, because MLive is a cornerstone, I think, of our community. But I do think there are some practices that are less than favorable within that space. Again, call Adrian. I'll hook you up with somebody there that I trust and that you can trust without having any issues. An additional participant question along the same lines here was, is it important for professional business to be engaging on multiple platforms, or is it okay to just focus on one? And of course, like all great answers, I'm going to say it depends. While 97% of marketers are using social media to engage with their audiences, that comes in 5 different areas. So I'm going to show you how that matters and then lead into some advice here in a second. But there are 5 types of social media platforms, basically. Social networking, which everybody's familiar with. Photo sharing, which most people are on Instagram these days. Video sharing through like Vimeo and YouTube. Interactive media, which of course is super hot right now. And then this idea of like this micro-blogging community or community building space. Tumblr is still a thing out there, you guys. And Reddit is one of my all-time favorite time hogs. So is it okay to focus on just one? Kind of. I mean, if you look at this graphic here, a small fraction of every platform user base is unique, but for most cases, a large platform can also help influence small platforms. So marketers can reach more than 99% of the users of things like Snapchat here, let's see, Twitter, TikTok, if they're simply on Facebook. So you're not excluding those audiences, you're actually including them, because they're going to be on across multiple platforms. And I would say, try not to think of it like I have to be everywhere, but like, what are you best at, or what is your staff best at, or like, what do you think can make the most impact for the audience that you are trying to recruit or engage? These numbers are going to constantly change. You can't possibly keep up with this. So I would say focus is going to be really important. There are a few things you have to consider with this question. It's not as easy as just saying, oh no, just focus on one. You have to ask yourself a few things. Before you say yes and you grab all the things and you're like, I'm going to do all the social media, I want you to just ask yourself, how much time do you really have? A really common error is for people to say, I'm going to like really get into this social media thing, except it turns out you have other things you have to do, like run your business, for example, pay your staff, recruit new business, etc. And so taking it on personally is probably not the greatest idea. I would say if you have the resources to hire someone, this is probably a good idea for that. You're going to think you have time to strategize around every social platform and devote yourself to like time on every single social platform. You're not. This is just like free therapy here. You're not. I see this all the time. I see it in volunteer organizations, nonprofit organizations, small businesses, large businesses. Everybody has a grand idea. They think it takes like 5 minutes to like throw up a post on social. It doesn't. Don't insult social media people by even assuming that that's the case. The next question I want to know is, do you have resources for creating graphics and videos? Just because Canva exists does not mean we should all be using it like we're graphic designers. That's absurd. We're also not all video editors. You can't just shoot video and call it good. That's not how it works. There are times where that's okay. You want to go be on TikTok? Go for it. Take the crappiest videos you want. Do whatever you care about. Be your authentic self. That's great. But from a business perspective, I would argue you probably want to shore that up a little bit before you put that out with your brand on it. The next thing I want to know is what are you even using it for? Do your goals involve boosting your brand awareness or traffic or revenue? If so, choose appropriately. Again, don't be somewhere just to be someplace. This is the difference between an output, which is doing all the things, and an outcome, which is actually having a revenue, let's say, factor attached to that, or some kind of return on investment that you're going for, or a sales goal or a conversion goal. You really have to understand how that works. Next, the thing that's really hardest, I think, for some people to stomach is, do you actually need an additional staff member to run this platform or these platforms, or will it just be okay for you to maintain it yourself? Again, sister to sister, it's not going to be okay if you do it. I promise. It's going to fall behind. It's going to lag. You won't be able to keep up. I'm not trying to scare you or anything, and maybe you're part of a startup and you have to do this, but I would say make sure that you're putting in your budget, even in the next 6 months to a year, somebody that can help you part-time or as a freelancer if you can't afford to do it right now, in order to grow that aspect of it. Again, don't just do it to do it. It does have to be done appropriately and professionally. I just wanted to point out here, I'm going to get into trust in just a second, which is a couple of questions that I received too. So in looking how online activities fare between men and women, they're almost equal in engaging online activities, ranging from the top one here, streaming more shows on devices, to, of course, my favorite, which is the flip-flop of the disparity, which is video games, just like in my household. So when you're thinking about reaching people and reaching different demographics, particularly gender, this is something to consider, is where people are and what they're doing, which leads us to increased social media use. This is the percentage of internet users who report spending more time on social media due to COVID. We're moving into the point here about trust, so bear with me. But in this humongous study that Global Web Index, they found 40% of internet users have been spending more time in recent months. I mean, look at the Philippines, 64% more time. What do we got for US? 28% more time for the United States. So people are there, they're in equal amounts, and we're not just using it for entertainment. 80% of mobile phone users surveyed by Ericsson reported that the internet assist here is good, that we're using apps in an appropriate and a productive way, that we have had help coping with COVID, we have had help staying in touch with friends and family, and that we've even maybe improved our mental health as a result of staying connected in this very, very easy way. Now, the good with the bad, right? It turns out anything that's excessive, even kale, I know, even kale, it's really not that great. You can't eat a bunch of one thing. You can't be excessive in any one area, and you can't really, really force yourself to think that everything that you do with excess is good. Plenty of evidence is shown to the internet is harmful, that social media is harmful, that things can happen. There is a dark side to social media, as a lot of people say. However, these same technologies that seem to divide us, even stoke the fire sometimes, can also improve people's quality of life considerably. When we're looking at news and how people, again, use social media, this is a percentage of worldwide service respondents that said that they use social media to discover news. 46% of them find that on Facebook. And I know, you guys know what that means, right? Facebook has not had the best track record with unbiased or, often sometimes real, I guess, news. But they're getting it there anyway. This happens with my parents all the time, honestly. I saw it on Facebook. I mean, you have probably heard that more times than you care to even discuss with your own family. And they're finding it in all sorts of other different places. But I would say that in thinking about social platforms as social sources of news, we have to consider the overarching idea of trust. So pre-COVID, let's go back just a sec. The Edelman Intelligence area of Edelman Communications worldwide does a survey, I think twice a year. They did another one during COVID here that just looks into like the amount of trust or factors of trust within publics. And I know many of you have probably read this, especially if you're working in communications, but it's called the Edelman Trust Barometer. And pre-COVID, 75% of people trust their employers more than anything else, more than any other institution in any singular role that they have. In April, they were resurveyed, and in May, new results came out. And actually, it was kind of astonishing because government is now the number one. It has never been the number one. 20 years of a survey, never ever has this been number one. What drives this trust isn't really, I think, operational decisions, but really the values and the contributions and like what the future looks like, right? So we're in a pandemic and looking for the best sources, the most sources, the things that they can trust the most. We saw the impact of trust make its way through social networks in a really accelerated fashion because of data privacy concerns, fake news, malicious content even, and trust continues to fall among consumers in general. In this area, we do see a gain in government, more so I think because we're looking to have the right information, and that's looked at as a trusted source of information. Now that is a whole nother conversation we could have for another day, but we're just gonna say good on that for now and think that we are really concerned about focusing on efficacy claims of government and how people interact with and engage with the primary sources and the good sources, right? Thinking of the trust barometer, other areas to kind of consider and think about when we're talking about social media is that traditional media and owned media both grew. They saw pretty big gains. However, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, or NPOs, nonprofit organizations, and experts have really taken sort of the lead in this area. Think of like Dr. Fauci, for example. I mean, he's basically like a celebrity, but he's also hugely trusted in this space, hugely. I just sounded like Donald Trump. Forgive that for a second. 67% of respondents worried about false and inaccurate statements being spread about the virus. And so they're really looking to have somebody they can put their trust in order to get the information that they need for it to be credible, unbiased, and the truth. Because concerns about fake news still loom pretty large, especially on social media, where we have already had our trust broken quite a few times by very large social media platforms. So a participant question in this area is, have you noticed any change in tonality in social media engagement since the onset of COVID-19? Is it more negative, more positive? I know you're so used to non-answers now, so I'm gonna give you sort of the idea of like multiple variables happening at one time equals sort of the perfect storm. Are people better or worse, nicer or meaner on social media? It's hard to say. It depends on your filter bubble, honestly, and what kind of consuming that you're doing. But what has changed for engagement that I can tell you with certainty, because this kind of thing is studied, is that the optimum times to post across all types of businesses has changed dramatically. If you haven't redone your social strategy since COVID as a business or even like your personal posting strategy, you should go re-examine that immediately. It has changed a lot from days of the week to times in the day. But all volume across all channels has decreased for the most part for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, like the bigger three, right? Brands receive more incoming engagements now than they used to. However, direct messages have decreased across all platforms except Instagram, where people are apparently DMing a lot more. And also, we're looking at industry-specific type of changes. The ones that are active are obviously like healthcare and like media, right? The ones that have obviously decreased are travel and sports. And so I don't necessarily know that the tone has changed, but like pretty much everything else has changed. And so I think it's pretty safe to assume that there is a lot more variance present than ever before, and we are a lot more sensitive to picking up on that variance. But COVID didn't emerge in like this perfect little bubble and cause all these problems. We have political drama, social justice unrest. There are so many layers to this that it's really difficult to pinpoint just any one specific thing or if it's better or worse. Another question, honestly, this is like my favorite question that was submitted. So thanks to whoever pulled this one out of here, because I have a lot of feelings on this one. But do I think that Facebook could evolve if they change the rules or the regulations surrounding fact-checking hate speech and misinformation? Could they? Of course they could. Will they? Hell no, they won't. Why not? Because of 70.7 billion reasons. 70.7 billion US dollars is the revenue that Facebook made in 2019. Why would they change anything? And I know it's complicated, right? There's really no intel into like what makes Facebook tick. Everyone's seen Mark Zuckerberg in Senate proceedings. It's damaging, savage, really. If you see how, if you're watching that on C-SPAN like I am, and they have served you up what Disney princess quizzes are you for the last, 10 years, and you have willfully taken them. And if it weren't for a whistleblower, you would still be taking them, forfeiting your personal information, despite the terms and conditions that you signed up for. It's easy to call foul, and how could they do this to us and feel like you're let down? I understand all those feelings, but the fact of the matter is you let them, I let them, we've all let them. And so nothing that Facebook has done to date has been proactive in this area of protecting people, information, or things, especially your data. I mean, we all remember Cambridge Analytica from last year or the year before that, right? They don't do anything unless it's in response to threat of government oversight, regulation, or specifically to avoid those things. We're spending a ton more time on social. I know, it's the red thread that goes through this whole thing, right? We're spending 2 hours and 20 minutes on social. It varies from age group to age group. You can see where you fall in this graphic here. I'm here to just kind of dissect a little bit to like, why does this matter? Well, digital's changed a lot of things. The number of people around the world, as we mentioned, is increasing in terms of usage. Globally, we have more than 5.19 billion people use mobile phones, which is up a considerable amount, 124 million over the past year, which is almost 3%. That was terrible math in my head. All this should really make us think about and care about like what's next. So what are our future considerations? I know TikTok is what everybody's talking about. If you have kids or if you're with students or maybe even you yourself, I have a TikTok account. I don't use it to make stuff, but dang, is it entertaining. I watch that a lot. The use there has surged and the future growth might be a little challenging for a couple of reasons I'm going to talk about in a second. Instagram has made huge audience milestones through their advertising. They're a big money maker. I don't see that changing anytime soon. Almost everybody is on Instagram. And then of course, search behaviors are evolving with different implications for different types of brands. And so I'm not talking necessarily about like Google search or like SEO or stuff like that. That's not really in the purview of this presentation. But how people use social media as search engines, that is something that has changed. And then my favorite here, the future is private, Mark Zuckerberg, 2019. Those are the 4 considerations that I want you to focus on for the next couple minutes here. So ByteDance is the company that owns TikTok, and they don't really publish a lot of public figures, but there was a company called Data Reportal who did an analysis and was able to tease out that roughly 800 million monthly active users outside of China before the India ban. I don't know if you know about the politics of this, but India banned it. United States was going to ban it. End up being, I think it's going to be purchased. But this is a huge hurdle for TikTok's growth. And so when you're thinking about how cool this is, or if you want to invest in this from a business perspective in terms of advertising, you first have to consider if there's going to be a ceiling on the audience and also what audience is actually on here making those decisions. The second one here, Instagram and their audience overview, you can reach 1 billion people using ads on Instagram. That is astonishing. The newest data, of course, shows 111 million users to its advertising for the last quarter. That's grown by more than 10%. It's not showing any signs of slowing. And it is pretty fantastical actually to watch this because it's changed so much. I mean, there are entire channels on Instagram TV that are dedicated to like, the next friends basically. And then finally here, the third thing I wanted you to be aware of is like looking at social media for brand research. So this big study that I was talking about earlier, Global Web Index, found that social networks are playing an increasing role in just how people do brand research, period. Of course, social media is second to search engines. However, the gap between them is actually closing. When people look to buy things or to engage with brands, they're doing it largely on social media. And the social networks are now the top choice between ages 16 and 24 when it comes to actual primary brand research, which that figure is actually ahead of search engines. This is particularly evident in young women who are turning to social media for all of their research needs for just about every topic. So we're also looking at the search behaviors in terms of like closing that gap. The millennial and Gen Z are who we're focused on in this space. If you download this presentation after they send out this video, I really want you to think about how that gap is closing and whether or not you have to, where you have to be more. How much better your content on social has to be. Just the very fact of filling out your, filling out your profiles for your company completely, making sure that, people, when they do reviews, that they're not going unanswered and that they're still engaged in the brand, not just they're absorbing your brand, but really so that you're able to entertain them, but also satisfy what their needs are from a customer service perspective, which is becoming more and more relevant. So we had a question that pops in here about brands, because we were just talking about searching in brands. So to what extent is personal social media versus professional overlap? Should I expect to build my own brand as a person? So here's my very unpopular opinion. Fortunately or unfortunately, whomever you are, personal you and professional you are in fact the same you. So think about this. If you are applying for a job and somebody looks up your social platforms, and then you get in and you're a whole different person when you sit down in front of them as quote unquote professional you, that's going to raise more questions than it would if you shared a bunch of cat videos on your Twitter account. So I would encourage you to think more authentically and transparency in the true vein of public relations and really that two-way communication. The idea of a personal brand is fine. We talk about it in school a lot because when students are moving from student to professional, they do have to do some work on that personal brand, because personal you have to start thinking about it earlier and earlier. You can't, it's permanent. The internet's permanent, right? It's the actual permanent record. In grade school, they were like, oh, it's going your permanent record, but there wasn't a permanent record. This actually literally is your permanent record. So taking all of the aspects of you that are marketable and good and things that you want to put out there to sell and gain trust is important. You don't have all the control. Remember that keg stand that you did at that tailgate? Somebody took a picture of that, and whether or not you tagged yourself in it doesn't matter, because someone else could have tagged you in it, or someone could have put that as their profile picture and seen you. So it's not just dependent on you. The University of Vermont had a startling, honestly, it took me a second to really think about this, had a startling study that said that your behavior is now actually predictable from the social media data of 8 or 9 of your friends, even if you've deleted your accounts. So they can build your profile based on the people that you surround yourself with. So this is a really good inventory of those friends that you have on Facebook. Really consider what the impact of that is on you as a person, based on the information that somebody could scrub from somebody else's Facebook posts, for example. Mark Zuckerberg says the future is private. We have Facebook groups now. We have all sorts of ways to engage private areas for brands and for personal use. But I think that 2021 and plus, into the future, like Hootsuite here, will be about finding that balance or striking that balance where brands have to really have this public feed, but also pull people into private channels to make them feel heard or special, to really have relationships with those customers and to really show that they care. It's also a great place to mine data that you can use to improve your brand or improve your presence. We had a participant question that is, with the increase in consumer awareness around data privacy and sharing, how do you think that this will play out in social media? Does anybody care? Everybody says they care, but nobody's willing to sacrifice to get it. Pew Research reported in late 2019, 80% of social media users are concerned about businesses and advertising, personal data, privacy, etc. And I think all that does matter eventually. Advocate for tighter regulations like GDPR, or California has a really intense privacy law about personal data. But honestly, the average person, they say they care, but they aren't doing anything to show that they care. deactivating accounts. They're not stopping to share, stopping their personal information to being shared online. So they're looking more toward the convenience of having the apps, or more toward the convenience of the activity, and less toward the long-term repercussions. So some content trends that we're seeing is really this idea of growth by acquisition. So Facebook just keeps buying everything up, right? I would imagine that there'll be some more well-timed acquisitions at some point here in the next couple of years. It seems to be that if like you can't beat them, buy them. I think that the timed content is something that will continue to gain popularity. You know, the stuff that you like put out there like on stories and it disappears within 24 hours. I think that that will continue to increase and improve, especially among younger generations. And Facebook is going to, video is going to dominate for quite a long time. I personally find video sometimes inconvenient to actually focus on or sit down and watch during like a regular business day, for example. But I will say I spend a great deal of my personal time, like for entertainment, consuming things that are of a need of video. But yeah, apps that like solve a problem and disappear, those are going to be pretty hot. So who cares? We're going to wind down here and I'll take some questions. But I mean, you should care. Think about how social media fits into your life. Think about how it fits into a business that you're working with, or how it could be improved, or what the strategy could be. It's so pervasive. You can't, like, everybody is on it, right? Finding those conversations that I think matter more or matter deeply is going to be of greater consequence going forward. Understanding that social is supposed to be social, not everything pre-planned and pre-scheduled. I mean, that defeats like actually the purpose. And understanding that despite everything, you know, that we still have, I guess like social media doesn't account for all that much that we do online. We didn't even get into like all the time we just spend on the internet. I mean, that's like a whole nother can of worms that we could dissect later. But just thinking about how much time you spend connected is really important. But 1/3 of the time, you know, people are spending on social, so we should honor that. So should you panic? Somebody asked me, should I panic about all this? I can't keep up. What should I do? No, don't panic. I mean, social media is just a tool at the end of the day, right? It is not the only tool. It is a tool in your toolbox. It does seem a little bit like a red thread, like, you know, weaves through the community, weaves through your business, impacts legislation, has a great deal of impact, and we hear a lot about it, right? I was just reading an article actually the other day, and it was like the whole thing was just basically like Instagram posts. That was like the article, because that was the chronological nature of what the Instagram post came out of, or came down as. And so don't freak out. I know it's a lot. I think the idea of trends is a little bit LOL, because I think understanding sort of like the underlying sentiment and the theory behind things helps you improve practice of things. So understanding like social and how to engage with people is going to make you better on social media, for example. And that the newest and greatest thing is still only as good as you are in being a communicator or being able to provide appropriate messaging in order to elicit a response. Keep an eye on people, because people buy things from other people. People follow other people. It's not as scripted, I think, as sometimes we're led to believe about strategy. Strategy has a place, but you also have to be willing to listen and understand and be flexible with that. I'll just leave this here, but I was just doing a little research because I remember reading an article in like Forbes or Wired or something a long time ago about the original article that ran about the internet just being a fad in 1995. And so I kind of went down that rabbit hole like you do in terms of research. And there's a really great TED Talk with the person that said that, who's actually like an astronomer. And what his feelings and thoughts were on the history and the future of the internet, and how it's like no big deal. And he actually came full circle to reconcile that idea, but it was kind of watching Doc Brown from Back in the Future do it. So I fully encourage you to check that out. Do you feel like you need help? Most professors in the advertising and public relations program consult. There's tons of great freelancers out there. I'm happy to give you referrals if you feel like you need help. We do have a student-run firm that does real work for real clients. You can reach them at the website here on the screen. And then of course, I mean, if you feel like you need long-term help, why not hire a paid intern to help you get things off the ground and then incorporate them into your business? I just wanted to say thank you. If you need me, I'm findable. You can't miss me. I have a pretty unique name. You can find me there and connect on Twitter, which is not for the faint of heart, so be careful when you enter that one. But LinkedIn and of course the School of Comm, you can always find me there, and I'm happy to entertain any questions or help anybody that really needs some advice or some outreach. Thank you.
Adrian, thank you so much. So much great information packed into just a half an hour. I have a couple of questions I want to touch on here. We have about 10 minutes, so if anybody else has questions, please add them in there. One question we got was, what's your take on brands voicing their stance on critical issues like Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ inclusion? Should they not? And at what point is it relevant for them to just remain quiet?
Well, I think part of this is my personal opinion. Part of it is I've just read a whole bunch on this recently. If it's not authentic to your brand at this moment, meaning you haven't put the work in yet to be able to make a grand gesture or a grand statement, you don't have to make the statement. I'm not saying that you don't think it matters as a result of not making the statement. In fact, nobody is thinking that. I think what's worse is for you to make a statement and let's say your board of directors is all like middle-aged white dudes. Or, it's like show and tell, right? It's one thing to put a, black box in the Instagram when everybody else is doing it. It's another thing to actually support a movement for equality. That is not present in every business. And you have to have the tough talk with yourself if that is your intent and you really want to improve that matter, you need to do the work first. Then go and blow it out on social media afterwards if you feel like you have to. You may not have to. I think doing the work is more important than talking about doing the work.
Another question we got was about the age of users. Are you seeing a trend there? Is it getting younger? At what age are kids starting to use social media? It seems like it's constantly getting younger.
Geez, yeah. I mean, the studies vary on this, but all you have to do is go into a grocery store to do your own study. And you'll see that children as young as can hold a cell phone are doing it. And most of that is gaming or keeping them, busy or quiet or whatever, right? Entertaining them so that you can maintain your sense of semblance of self and creating and finishing something, right? Like the groceries, etc. But I don't know. I go back and forth, I think, in my own mind. Part of this is because I don't have children, so it's really hard for me to make this parental judgment call. The research is kind of equal in good and bad on this, the dark side and the light side of what social media does. And I think we've yet to see really long-term effects of this. We're right now in the very first truly digital native generation in college right now. And so I think that we'll get better information pretty soon here, especially with COVID and people having to be daycare and also be homeschooling and also be doing their job. I think that there'll probably be some more studies that paint a little bit better picture about what this actually means. I truly don't know. I think it seems to me that people are getting on social media earlier. The platforms still have minimum use ages out there. That doesn't mean that you can't trick or fool that. But I do think that I guess my general feeling is social media is not as huge of a problem maybe as some other people think it is, because I've often used it for a utility as opposed to just entertainment. So I think that's yet to be seen, I guess, is the short answer on that.
What about maybe I don't want to say opposite of that, but the other end of the spectrum, I guess, people over the age of 60, 65.
Yeah, grandmas and grandpas on social. I mean, it's happening and they're spending a great deal of time there. And I mean, during COVID, I think there was some really beautiful moments about that shared where, everybody was kind of cut off from nursing homes and hospitals and stuff. And there were really some cute moments where we were able to watch people communicate through social with family and loved ones when they previously couldn't. And I guess that's more digital, but Overall, I think that social media in that space has helped us connect during this time. But it's not without consequences sometimes. COVID was like a strange, like I said, a strange situation, right? We had COVID, we had social justice issues, we have political issues. And so, I mean, the balance seems to be pretty good, but there are good and bad things out there associated with both of those spaces.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, kind of a career angle on this. How would you, for people who are maybe job searching, looking to change jobs, how would you recommend people demonstrate to a potential employer their proficiency in social media, other than saying, I have social media, I've used it? And I
Right,
think
I know.
especially
Yeah.
about people who don't do it as, maybe it's just kind of part of their job, but they want to do it more, or they, you know, it's required as a part of a new job. What's a good way to demonstrate that on a resume or in an interview?
Yeah, sure. There's nothing stopping you from setting up like a test company or your own small business or something like that to actually show how you can, say, run an ad campaign on Facebook, or how you can, build a business from scratch. In fact, more and more students are entrepreneurs than I've ever seen, ever. Starting small businesses from scratch, using social media to to push those into existence, essentially. And if you're going from like that kind of aspect or that angle to like maybe you want a corporate job next or something, that's a pretty simple way to show that, is to actually do what you want to do, right? To practice what you want to do in the future. Additionally, I mean, there are no shortage of certification programs through things like HubSpot, Hootsuite, TalkWalker. I mean, everybody has one, I feel like, and most of them are free. Not all of them, not Facebook's, of course. But you can still do the education parts of Facebook. It's called Blueprint. You can still do that. You just can't take the certification. I think any reasonable person who is hiring somebody for a role like this is hopefully not, no offense to HR people, but it's hopefully not just putting their HR person in front of their potential new social media director and having them question them, but they're really trying to understand whether or not they have the prerequisite skills in order to make that job happen at that place. And this goes back to that, like, social media folks are pretty like underestimated, right? Like anyone thinks anyone can run social media. Like it's not a big deal. And I think when people actually try to do that, they find out that like the cold hard truth about that, because it is strategic and it is time intensive, and there's a lot to consider about reactions and customer service perspectives. But to really prove you can do it, you have to do it. Most people that are good writers are going to be pretty good at social media. They are careful and cautious and conscientious. People that are creative are going to be good also, because they're thinking about other things outside of that. So really trying to link, if you have a lack of experience, let's say, really trying to link that together, but also you can't just wait for someone to teach you something. Like school is not about being taught all of the things that you need to walk out the door and get a job. It's much grander than that. And so when I see people, talk about like how little about social, well, that's because like what you learn today and what you learn in a year are going to be different anyway. So you have to really foster this sort of like to go back to like the reason that we're here, right? This continuing education process. And that is the stuff you learn in the classroom, but also the stuff that you teach yourself on your own in your free time. Running your own social media is not the same as running a corporate social media account. It just isn't. There are many more things to consider. But if you're able to pair like this really creative personal social media, let's say, and like a bunch of certifications that show that you can do it, even graduating and getting into your first job, that's going to show me as a interviewer that you have potential in this space because you're exercising it and you're trying it out in this other space. And that like with the right mentor and all of those things, that it's probably going to work out fine. It is hard. I will not I don't want that to go unrecognized. It's hard to say like, I'm good at this. Look at this. I didn't do a campaign that raised, 70,000 more in sales than last year at Christmas time or anything like that. You in doing those internships specifically, volunteering. I mean, you could probably walk into any nonprofit right now and volunteer yourself on a committee or on as a social media person if you wanted to get that experience with the trust and help of somebody that really truly needs that help. There are no shortages of jobs out there. there are no shortages of opportunities, and anyone that says that there are is actually not looking. Honestly, I challenge students on this all the time, because like they're exasperated and they can't find this or they can't find that. And I'm like, but you're just looking at the stuff that's available. Sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper and find that nonprofit that you're really passionate about and just go ask them. It might not be something that's posted or they even thought to post, but there are plenty of ways to gain that experience as a student. Or if you want to level up in your career even.
Yeah. Last question here, and then Melissa, we'll turn it back to you to close us out. Kind of two questions. I'm going to combine them into one. Any really good, legitimate books, not anything self-published or, you know, a blog that somebody wrote about creating social media strategy that you would recommend? And then similarly, good resources you would recommend to keep up to date on what's happening in the world of social media.
Yeah, so I actually have compiled some of these in a document. So if you don't mind, I'll just get you the document to include with this video.
Okay.
I think, you know, mostly it's honestly just day-to-day reading is how most people do this. I mean, I didn't have a class in digital media, and I worked almost my whole career in digital media. So it's more or less like how good are you at finding things, and what newsletters are you signed up for and stuff like that. So I'll create a list of some links and some people that I know, and some books, of course, that you can distribute to the people that are on this webinar.
Great. Yeah, we'll include that along with the video in the follow-up email.
Of
Melissa?
course.
Thank you so much. And before everyone leaves, Adrian, I think one of our participants just put a comment in the chat that said you are the best.
Hi, Megan.
Right? and one of the things I heard you say, which was, it's hard for us to say, I'm good at this. And clearly, whether it's hard for you to say you are good at this or not, you clearly are. And thank you for sharing your expertise and your information. Before everybody runs off, though, I want to make sure that you know that, as Adrian just mentioned, she's going to pull together some resources. And if there were some questions that weren't answered, maybe we'll put a few of those in there. You've got some ways to connect in with her as well. Afterwards, if you had a specific question that was not asked, we will send that and the recording out to you as well. But you'll also get right now a link in the chat to a survey about how was this session today? What worked well for you? Adrian referenced a little bit about you taking learning into your own hands. That is exactly what you have done today. Kudos to you. Let us know how we can better serve you as you're on that journey. As you know, we think about supporting alumni and people in the community on their lifelong journey, no matter what that looks like, right? Whether it's a formal class or whether it's an informal experience like this. You can check out a link that Kyle just put in the chat as well that is called the L3 initiative, which is the Laker Lifetime Learning Commitment, which will help alums. You know, one way to re-engage is if you want to take another class with Adrian, or if you haven't yet decided you want to take a class. In addition to all of these amazing things that she does, she teaches every semester as well. So you know, you can think about re-engaging that way as well. And there are some financial resources to support you in doing that as well. And then last and certainly not least, if you enjoyed today, we hope that you will consider joining us next month. We'll be getting together on Friday, November 20th. It's our first Friday session. So if you have thoughts about that in the chat, throw that in. It's at noon again. And it's in a sense related to a little bit of things that I heard, which was being on the internet. Our topic next month is going to be how to Google like a librarian. And yes, whether you are searching, you know, for the best turkey recipe, or searching how to have those rough family discussions that you may be having during the holiday, or searching how to create the best business plan, or create your social media profile, right? Join us to hear from some of GVSU's librarians, some of our faculty there who are amazing and engaging, just like Adrian was today. And again, I will close it by saying once again, thank you, Adrian, for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Have a great day, everyone.